Good afternoon, family. Thanks for checking out today's video. If you are new here, my name is Jonathan, and I created this channel as a way to record my progress as I work towards my goal of losing 300 pounds. If you'd like to join the family, hit that subscribe button down below. Also, make sure you click on the bell icon so you get alerted when I go live or post new videos. And I'd really appreciate it if you hit the thumbs up button on this video as well. If you'd like to participate on the discussion, you can join me most weekdays where I go live on YouTube around 4 p.m. Central Time, or outside of YouTube, you can consider joining the Discord I created. There is a link for that down in the description below. Also down in the description below is a link to a Pinterest board. That's a great place for you guys to check out some of the different recipes that I've been enjoying as I've been working towards my goal. Today is day 908 of my 3-year challenge to lose 300 pounds. I've used a combination of extended water fasting and a whole food, plant-based, salt, oil, sugar-free diet to lose 250 pounds so far. If anybody has any non-scale victories they'd like to share, I'd love to hear your non-scale victories. If you have any on-scale victories, I love hearing those as well. If you are struggling with your diet, let us know, what's going on causing your struggles. If you're succeeding with your diet, let us know what you're doing to succeed. Share it with the rest of us. And at the end of the day, what are some things that you are doing that will make staying on your diet easier than the alternative? Switch over here. I hope everybody had a great evening or great day since yesterday. We had a kind of busy night last night. We have a younger dog that we've started taking to obedience training, and so we had that last night. So we ended up taking our dog to that. Me and Carrie went to that while the kids, the older kids, watched the younger kids. I guess it's one of the advantages of our kids growing up is that we can start having them watch each other for short periods of time. But we ended up going to the dog training and doing that. Just it's a small non-scale victory, but just being there in front of people, being on my feet for an hour is something that in the past would have been much more difficult than it was last night. And it was nice to, be able to be in front of people and not be embarrassed about my size, feel like I fit in as opposed to sticking out of a crowd. So that was nice taking the dog to that. On the way home, our one kid wasn't feeling very good, and so all day they'd had a hard time keeping any foods down. So we thought that we would get them some juice just so that they could get something with calories in it and see if they could keep the juice down. So I stopped at the store on the way home to pick up some juice, and I was tempted by the fruit that they had there. And I did not take a photo of all of the fruit I bought, but I did take a photo here of these grapes that we bought. They were candy heart grapes, and they were delicious. They were so sweet. I thought they had a real cotton candy taste to them. Carrie disagreed with me and the kids, but they were really good grapes, and we ate the whole bag of those last night. But I also picked up some apples and oranges that I didn't take a photo of here. Cindy Davison says the non-scale victory yesterday. You went to an athletic store to pick up a gift card, and you started looking at the clothing on the clearance rack, and you actually found a top that was a size small that fit. you haven't worn a size small since you were probably an infant. That's awesome that you were able to find something and it was in a size small. That is amazing. I am looking forward to getting to the point where there's only one X on my shirts and hopefully someday maybe getting to a size large if possible. So that's awesome that you were able to find a top that fit. And that it was a size small. That's great. Hello, Carrie. Hello, pretty girl's mom. Hope everything's going great today. But yeah, these grapes were delicious last night. And I also took a photo of some fruit that I had, a banana that I had. But I also had oranges. I also had apples. And so last night I felt like I had a ton of fruit going through. Let me see the other photos. Well, the next photo was our dinner. So there was no fruit in our dinner, but we had potatoes with a mushroom gravy on top of it. Very good dish that we really enjoy having. It had been a few weeks since we had this, so that was really nice to have last night. It rounded out my day of potatoes. I think I had almost a dozen potatoes throughout the whole day yesterday, but that was our dinner yesterday. Here's a picture of it all mixed up. Yes, Carrie says those French mushrooms. I don't even if the word's written in front of me, I might be able to say it, but yes, it's a mushroom gravy is what I'm gonna call it. So, and then the other fruit that I had last night was a bunch of pineapple from the Ninja Creamy. Carrie had frozen up some pineapple and I had some of that last night as a dessert. So I just had a ton of fruit yesterday between the grapes that I ate, the banana, I had apples. They had some like regular oranges at the store that I stopped at, so I picked up some of those because the little oranges we'd been picking up hadn't been the greatest the last few times. So I thought maybe if I tried a different type of orange that it would be good. And the oranges I got were great. They had a little bit different flavor and they were really good. I did not end up taking a photo of my breakfast, but I did have broccoli this morning as well as oatmeal. And then for lunch today, I had broccoli and potatoes as I normally. No, the French word starts with a B. It's like mushroom bourguignon or something like that. But I don't say those words very good. So I'm just going to call it mushroom gravy. Is that what you were asking with the chanterelles? Chanterelles? So, bourguignon. Yeah, something like that. I think that's how it is. So, oh, and then I did have one other photo that I was going through my photos today, and it's crazy how different life is at 270 pounds versus 520 pounds. And just like when I sit down now, I don't have that mound of stomach sticking out in front of me that used to make it difficult to get into my car without it rubbing on the steering wheel or putting a seatbelt on and getting it to snap. Just seeing the difference in my face and everything is just crazy. You know, I'm glad I have these photos to go back and look at as a comparison, but the photos don't do any justice for how hard it was to live at 520 pounds. Like, there's no background in this photo, but I'm sitting at a chair at my kitchen table which is like where I would camp out when I got home. You know, it was either sitting there or laying down on one of the couches on, you know, on the main floor of our house. So, it's just, you know, tying my shoes, going to the bathroom, taking a shower, everything at 520 pounds was just so much more difficult than it is now. And the uh, the the having that, you know, I still have fat around my waist and, you know, my stomach, but just the size of it, like looking at it on the screen here and seeing how big the handles of fat that I had on the side of my body were, and my skin was just exploding, you know, like just being stretched as tight as it could be stretched. Um and just, you know, how wild that, I don't know, like how much that fat would have spread out if it didn't have the skin holding it in, you know. And the where I held all my fat, or I hold all my fat around my stomach and my abdomen, um all of the damage that that was causing to my internal organs, and the chaos that it was, you know, wrecking. Every time I put food in my mouth, every time I ate, I was injuring my body, versus now every time I eat, I'm healing my body. Pretty Girl's mom says, "Yeah, what a difference." Yeah, it's so crazy, you know. Like I lived at that weight, and I thought that I was thriving for somebody who was at 520 pounds. And I think that's what we all do, is that we say, well, at least I can do this for somebody who is this weight, you know. Well, somebody who weighs 300 pounds wouldn't be able to stand on their feet all day, so at least I can do that. Well, there's a lot of people that are 300 pounds that can stand on their feet all day. You're just one of those people. But, you know, you think of, well, at least I'm not as bad as this person who is 300 pounds, but they also are dealing with some other health issue. And you're only not as bad as that person because your health issue hasn't come up yet. Maybe you were like me and you avoided going to the doctor. I'm certain that if I would have gone to the doctor at any time between 2017 and 2020, when I started this, if I would have gotten blood work done, I probably would have been told that I was diabetic, or I was at least pre-diabetic. And looking at the conditions of my legs and the other things I had going on, you know, like those are things that I probably would have been diagnosed with, but instead of going to the doctor and finding that out, I avoided the doctor. And then I walked around thinking, well, I'm 500 pounds, but at least I'm not diabetic. Well, at least you haven't had a doctor tell you that you're diabetic. Hello, Jennifer. Thanks for checking in. I hope you're having a great day. Thanks for being here. And yeah, it's just, you know, going through the photos and looking at myself and just seeing the difference is crazy. And I can't imagine being that weight again. Like, I don't know how I got through it. I don't know how I managed to, you know, get through that time period without having that terminal kind of diagnosis that I had been waiting for. I can pull this away anyways. And yeah, so I was just going through the photos. I thought I would share that old photo of mine there. One of the things I wanted to talk about today was what I feel like is the number one thing that people can do to lose weight. And it's the most popular thing that people do to lose weight, but they don't necessarily realize that it's what they're doing. And what that is that's eliminating processed foods from your diet. We get all kinds of high calorie dense foods from the foods that we buy at the store now, because the companies process them so much and they make them hit all of those pleasure sensors in our brain and in our mouths and in our stomachs that they can hit. And it causes us to become addicted to those processed foods. Our bodies are always addicted to the foods that are going to give it the most dopamine and the foods that give it the most calories. And the foods that give you the most calories also give you the most dopamine hit. And so we're addicted to that dopamine hit. We're addicted to trying to find the most pleasurable source of anything, the most pleasurable source of food, the most pleasurable source of liquid, the most pleasurable source of entertainment, the most pleasurable source of relaxation. Like we're always trying to find how to do some action and make it the most pleasurable way possible. Like you go through work and work sucks, but if you're eating foods that spike your dopamine throughout the time you're at work, it makes work being pleasurable. And that's the pleasure trap. Like we are constantly trying to seek that pleasure source. And when we lived in a natural environment, we could only get so far. We could only get so much dopamine from our environment. But now that companies have gotten involved and started to chemically engineer our foods, the food that is at the grocery store is not the food that we evolved eating, not the food that we have been eating up until the last really 50 years. If you look at our diet prior to the 1950s, there was no processed foods, or the processing of foods was very minimal. And then after the 50s, we started finding ways to manufacture through factories, and in making food in bulk, they had to find ways for it to preserve. They found ways for it to be easier for the consumer to make the item. Like making macaroni and cheese would not be an easy process if you had to do it yourself from scratch. But now you can get the noodles in a box with a dehydrated powder that's the cheese. Imagine the effort that it takes to make that dehydrated cheese. That's something that didn't exist before the 1950s. And so we're eating this diet here for the last 70 years that didn't exist prior to that point. And what I think that, what the result of that is a population that's overweight, and it's continuing to get overweight. And we're trying to, those of us that are overweight are trying to find ways to combat being overweight. So we're trying all of these different diets. We're doing low carb diets. We're doing high carb, low fat diets. We're doing Mediterranean diets. We're paleo diets. We're trying, mono dieting. We're doing all of these different things to diet. And many of those things see success within the first few weeks or the first month that somebody's able to sustain doing that diet. And what I feel like the reason why all of those diets are seeing, or many of those diets are seeing those positive results in the first couple weeks or the first couple months, is because they are diets that almost all diets eliminate a huge portion of the processed foods that you were eating prior to starting that diet. Hey, Stephanie, checking in. Hello. And Susan, I think you checked in here too. I hope you guys are having a great day. So these diets, and I went on many of them where I saw short-term success. I drastically changed my diet. And the the result of me drastically changing my diet was I had drastic results in some cases. But the problem with those diets came with me not being able to keep the processed foods out of my diet, or some of those diets still had an amount of processed foods in them as part of their diet. I would go on the Weight Watchers diet, and then I would buy the bag of candy, the little sleeve of candies that they would sell, or I would buy their, low calorie packs of crisps and things like that. That's, modifying and changing the foods I was eating, but it was still eating of processed foods. And by still having a small amount of processed foods in my diet, it allowed the entrance of larger amounts of processed foods, because I could just start overeating those Weight Watcher snacks that I had, or on other diets. When I was taking appetite suppressants, I was eating all kinds of crap foods that I wasn't able, I was never changing my diet. I was never fixing my diet, and I was never learning how to keep the processed foods out of my diet. Jennifer here says, someone told you without GMOs, we couldn't feed our population, that our crops wouldn't yield enough. You find that hard to believe, maybe an excuse to eat processed or unclean foods. Thoughts? So there's a couple things. We produce enough food to feed billions of land animals that we then kill and eat for our own taste pleasures. Those animals don't eat that crop and then absorb 100% of the calories of that crop. They absorb a very small percentage of those crops that they're being fed. And then we take their waste and we use it to fertilize, because what they don't absorb comes out through their waste. And if we don't put the nutrients that they don't absorb back into the land, then the crops won't grow on the land, because there won't be enough nutrients on the land for the crops to grow. But anyways, we produce enough food to feed all of those land animals. If we were to switch to not having food for land animals, not having land animals fed that way, and we switch those fields to human food or people food, we would have plenty of land to feed the 350 million people or 400 million people that we have in the US. And we could probably use lower yielding crops and still have enough food for everybody and land left over. So that would kind of be a little bit of my argument about it. It is, having the crops we eat, the potatoes that I eat are bigger potatoes than they would have grown 50 years ago. The apples that we get are different varieties than we would have seen years and years ago. I believe we could feed our population with non-GMO, but people aren't thinking of we would be eating different things than maybe what we're growing now too, because we grow things for that. Pretty Girl's mom here says that Monsanto spread that idea around that we would not have enough land without the GMOs. That is something that it's, again, I don't know that it I don't think we would run out of food. I think that we would be eating different foods, like if if it became an issue, I personally could potentially grow enough food for my family where I live. And so, yeah, I think that the space, it's tougher for people that are in dense population areas to have that much food, but you're talking about different yields of things too, because all the crops that I see when I think of farm crops, I think of corn, because I live in Iowa, surrounded by corn, and I think that's what a lot of people think about when they think about crops, when they think about fields, is fields of corn or fields of soybeans. But there's lots of other types of fields. There's fields of apples and oranges, and those foods are farmed and processed in a different way than corn is, and it's used for a different thing. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's the and that's that equation that happens with the animals that we feed. That was one of those things that I really I was kind of frustrated that I hadn't thought of it prior to when I kind of came across it through my research. The idea that, we have enough food to feed all of these cows, pigs, sheep, chickens that we eat. And they're not absorbing all of the calories that they're eating. They're absorbing a small amount of the calories that they're eating, probably, just like we don't absorb all of the calories that we eat. Or maybe not a small amount, maybe it's a large amount, I don't know. But there's an amount that they don't absorb. And like that's a huge amount of waste. And it's really what, I don't know. I think that the idea of eating a vegan diet was not anything I thought of eating before this, but as our technology gets better and they get closer to being able to produce meat through laboratory means or through a factory versus having to impregnate a cow and have that cow, give birth and then take that child from that cow and feed it and raise it to an age that it can be slaughtered, and all of the waste and the cost of feeding that animal and taking care of that animal or paying its vet bills, things like that. As things switch and it becomes more possible to do it in a lab, I think companies are going to go to that. They're going to look at, seeing, look at all the waste that's happening here. We can control 100% of the food that we make and build, build it to custom, exactly 12.25% of fat, exactly this many grams of protein. They're going to want to switch to that because there's so much uncertainty and waste in the animal industry, and unnecessary death. Animals are born lame, or they're born the wrong gender, depending on the industry. And when they're able to make it without all of that for cheaper, they're going to start switching to that kind of they're going to start to change the population's mind about that type of thing. So I think that, I don't know, I just went on a rant, I guess, but I think that if we end up going vegan as a population, it's going to be because the corporations have found a way to make the meat without killing the animals. And then they'll turn around and say, hey, come buy our no-kill meat, come save the planet by, and then they're going to start using all of these arguments that the vegans and the environmentalists have been using to promote eating a lab-grown meat. And, but I don't know. Anyways, back to the processed foods, where they're killing us with processed foods, that they are also using those GMO crops to build, to make these processed foods. Pretty Girl's mom says whole food plant-based rants are very helpful. I hope so. It'll never make, even when they develop lab meat, I don't think it'll ever really make meat good for you to eat. And on top of it, my whole rant today before that has been about processed foods, and you don't get any more processed than somebody making it from a few cells and cultures and then, creating it. I don't think you get any more processed than that. But yeah, every diet I've been on, a huge chunk of the success has been removal of processed foods or removal of the amount of processed foods that I've eaten. Because when I think of my appetite suppressant diet from 10 years ago, everything I ate was 100% processed, but the overall volume of processed foods that I ate was very small because I was only eating a couple things. And the problem with that, and many people understand, yes, I get it, get rid of the processed foods, that's what you need to do. But then they look at the foods that are highly processed on the shelves, and they start saying, well, I need to cut out potatoes because I shouldn't have potato chips. And that's not the right way to think. You need to get rid of the processedness of potato chips, but you don't need to get rid of the potatoes. But all of these foods that are on the shelves are, it's Rice Crisps and things like that, that if you just ate the rice, that's healthy. Eating Rice Crisps is not healthy. Ricky here says that your weakness is Doritos. Yes, the chips, are highly addictive because they've spent so much money engineering those Doritos to be a specific shape, a specific texture, have a certain crunch, have the salt that's on it dissolve a specific way. They process it to make it as dopamine stimulating as possible. Then that plays with our brain because our brain is wired to always go for the most dopamine possible. And when we lived in nature, the most dopamine possible meant climbing a tree to pull an apple down, or it meant collecting berries. It didn't mean walking down the aisle of the store and finding a bag that was the perfect color of red with the perfect font type on the front, the perfect facts on it to get you to buy the chips that have then been modified and had fiber removed and had other items added to fortify it. And so it's very difficult. Cindy here says the key is the hole in the front of the plant-based, coined by Colin Campbell. Stay away from the processed crap. Yeah, I was listening to Chef AJ the other day for her 1500th episode. She had Colin Campbell on for her as her guest, and that was something that he talked a lot about, is the whole part of it, like looking at your diet as a whole too, but eating the whole food, not just eating the insides or, eating all of it. Jennifer says, oh, wow, I wonder if I could ever climb a tree now. I'm looking forward to being able to do some of those things that I've never been able to do. Like, as a heavy person, when I was in high school about this weight, I thought it was amazing that, or many people, not just me, thought it was amazing that I could do a cartwheel. And that was, it probably wasn't even a pretty cartwheel, but for somebody at 270 pounds, seeing him do a cartwheel was shocking to some people. And now as I'm losing weight and I'm at that weight that I was then, that I was able to do cartwheels, I think about just doing something as simple as a pull-up. When I'm 220 pounds, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't be able to do a pull-up, something like just something that's more athletic than I've ever done as an adult. And it's as simple as just doing a single pull-up. But yeah, climbing a tree would also be something that would be interesting to try, when I get to 220 pounds or even lighter. But the processed foods, yeah. So the foods that are so processed are plant foods. That you go to the shelves and it's hard to process. It's hard to highly process a meat item and then make it shelf stable. So a lot of the processed meats are in the refrigerator section or they're in the freezer section. There's plenty of processed vegetables in those sections too. But on the shelves, all the dry goods are highly processed plant foods. And so all these diets, they kind of call for eliminating processed foods. Stop eating added sugar. Stop eating, they say, a lot, the big fad right now is the low carb, but it's only because the low carbs that they're talking about getting rid of, or that they want people to get rid of, are processed carbs. It's not the carbohydrates that I'm eating, the plain potatoes that I'm eating, the bowls of rice that I'm eating, the mushrooms and the spinach and all of that stuff is not the carbs that you need to avoid. The donuts are the carbs that you need to avoid. The fried chips, the tortilla chips are the carbs that you need to avoid, and things like that. It's really, but they all get grouped together, and it's weird too, because there's like this division in the world that if it's a meat product, it's a protein, and if it's a vegetable product, it's a carbohydrate. And it's like it's almost like they're their own political parties, and you have to either join the protein carnivore keto world, or you have to join the plant-based carbohydrate world. But there's not room for anybody in the middle. It's a weird thing, but they don't realize is that both camps are still promoting the removal of processed foods. It's just the processed foods that they're calling for removal of, or in some cases it's the volume of processed foods that they're calling for. Carrie here saying our son is going on a climbing trip soon. I could go and chaperone. Yeah, I don't know if they let the adults play around with the kids like that. But maybe he'll have to go on a climbing trip, and then he'll have to take me on a trip and show me how to climb later. Jennifer says you might try when I'm ready. Maybe we can try it all together someday. What is that? Oh, climbing a tree. We could all try. You can try climbing a tree when I get ready to climb a tree. I could do a video. Hey, it's me climbing a tree. The video now would probably be me standing on a forklift and having somebody lift me up next to a tree. But maybe when I get down closer to my goal weight. Gene here says that you feel younger and stronger, but you still have the muscle tone of a 60-something-year-old person. Yes, it takes time to build muscle. And for me, I never really had a hard time building muscle. When I was in high school and was doing weight training, I was able to gain muscle really, really well. But what has kept me strong over the past 20 years has been the fact that I have been grossly overweight, and just doing anything required a large amount of muscle mass. You know, my legs and my calves, I feel like, are as big as anybody's legs or calves, and they needed to be that big in order to move somebody that was 520 pounds around, you know. And the same with my upper body. You know, I grew the muscle and the strength when I was younger, but my body maintained that because just getting out of bed was enough effort to be a workout, walking up the step. Carrie says she'd videotape us climbing the tree. Yeah, we'll have to find a very small, well, it had to be a very sturdy tree for me to climb, I guess. But Gene says it's kind of a hold my beer ER moment. Yes. Yeah, that would, check this out, guys. So yes, it would be something. And but yeah, but it's only possible. I would only be able to climb a tree because I've removed processed foods from my diet. And my diet may seem or sound extreme to people, but I believe that there is very few diets that people could eat that have less processed foods than the diet that I eat. You know, because having there's just about nothing that is not something that we don't process ourselves, you know. Like, I guess at the beginning of the day, our oat groats and steel cut oats, we don't cut the oat groats in half and make our own steel cut oats. But a lot of the foods we make ourselves, or we could make ourselves. Maybe we have canned tomatoes or canned beans that we could buy dry beans, or we could buy tomatoes and dice ourselves and process ourselves in that way. But there's not additional ingredients on our food. You know, like, that's a couple of the big aspects that I think, again, with the processed foods. Back in the 90s, I believe it was the 90s, the government decided to require nutritional labels to be put on foods. And those nutritional labels, while today we use them as the information source, or the you know, the all-knowing kind of label of what's in our food, when those were developed, they were designed to be a caution label to warn people that, hey, the food you're eating has this added to it. It has this removed from it. This is what is in the food that you're eating. And so when we go grocery shopping, so many of the foods that we buy don't have nutrition labels on them because it's not required to have a nutrition label on an apple or a nutrition label on a bag of spinach. You know, like, those foods don't have warning labels on them. The foods that we used to buy used to be covered with warning labels, and then the companies would spend billions of dollars to try to distract us from looking at those warning labels. Cindy says, can we all just virtually go on a hike together instead of climbing a tree? Yeah, that might be a better option to do. Maybe that's something I could figure out, is going live, like doing a hike or something. I'd figure that out on here. But yeah, I think that might be better, like Pretty Girl's mom says. Cindy says she had a hip replacement and you're scared to climb a tree. Yes, I get it. I would be nervous as well, but I'll be there to catch you if you fall. We'll all be down there at the bottom, trying not to laugh. So yeah, the processing foods, guys, like, I think that for us with our diet, it being so minimally processed, or so outside, you know, outside sources aren't processing the food that we are eating. We took back control of our diet. We now are, you know, not allowing the influence of the manufacturer to bias our decision in buying foods. You know, these manufacturers, they want your money. That's why they have the products on the shelves. And when they process the foods, once they do something to process the food, that's where they get to add their profit margin in. And the more they process the food, the more profit margin they can build into the foods. And so when you go to the store, you are seeing the product of high levels of processing, like I was talking about with the Doritos. But also, what happens is those companies are competing with other companies that are also doing high levels of processing on the foods. And so they're competing with each other for our dollars, for our money. So we'll buy their products, and they have to make their product more desirable than the competitors, which means they need to get a better dopamine response from us. They need to hit our pleasure trap harder to get us to buy their product over the competitors. And the companies are stuck in a position where they cannot make decisions that are the best decisions for their customer. They have to make decisions that are the best decisions for the shareholders of the company, because that's who they're beholden to. They just have to make sure that they don't get sued by their customers and the people don't get sick and die. But that's the bare minimum they have to do. They don't have to worry about those people getting sick and dying over years and years of eating their food. As long as they don't eat it one time and die, or a couple times and die, it's okay. But on the other end of the spectrum, they have to make sure that they are bringing in a profit, or they will lose their job. So if a food engineer comes to the CEO of the company and says, hey, this company is making a sports drink that is beating us on the shelves. More people are grabbing that sports drink than they're grabbing of our sports drink. And the difference between our products is that we use 12 grams of sugar and they use 14 grams of sugar. And I believe that the engineer then says to the CEO, I believe that if we increase our drink to having 15 or 16 grams of sugar, then we will be able to get some of that market share back that they've taken from us. And by doing that, you're going to make the company millions of dollars. But if you don't do that, we'll still make millions, but we could have made millions more. And if the shareholders find out that the guy making the decision says, no, I don't want to add more sugar to our product because then our customers will have health issues down the line from drinking something that has so much sugar, he'll get fired if he makes that decision, because the shareholders don't care if the customers die 12 years from now. They care that the customers are buying the product from them today and not buying the product from the competitor. And many times companies have put lines in the sand where they said that, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do this process. But then a competitor comes out and says, well, you know what? We don't have those morals. We're going to cross that line. And it puts the original company in a position where they have to cross that line, because if they don't, they have to answer to other people that don't care about their morals. They only care about the dollars, because that's why they bought the few shares of that company in the first place. They don't care about the product it sells. They only care that the company is profitable. And so that's, what we run into when we look at the processed foods that are on the shelves, is that they had to process it in order to make it something that's marketable to us. And they had to process it better than their competitors processed it, and do a better job advertising and hitting those other markers that we don't realize that they're trying to hit. Plants Only Muncher is asking, is there a rock climbing place near you? Maybe you could do that instead of climbing a tree. Well, my son is going to a rock climbing camp out. I feel like the place they're going is maybe 2 or 3 hours away. And I'm sure there's smaller, like, rock climbing walls locally. And I know there's a trampoline park actually that my kids have been to a couple times, that they have some rock climbing walls there. So maybe when I get to my goal weight, I can sign up to do rock climbing, along with the 100 other things I think that when I get to my goal weight, I want to do, like go to an amusement park and actually ride on all the rides. I could probably go and ride on most rides at an amusement park right now, if not all rides. But it's been my whole life that I've gone to amusement parks and not been able to go on all of the rides when I think about it. And so that that's another thing that I'd love to do. Rock climbing, amusement park, water park, all those fun things that I wished I could do more comfortably when I was overweight. Flying in a plane, maybe jumping out of a plane. That'd be a fun thing to try to do. Let's see. So with the processed foods, I think that the big thing that people don't realize is that's a common denominator amongst many diets that succeed, is the eliminating or the reduction of processed foods. And what I would say is that the closest you can get to having completely unprocessed foods, or foods that you process yourself, is going to get you the closest to the natural human diet that you can get to. And there's, like I said, there's very little things in our diet that is processed. The corn grits that we have from the polenta, that's, or whatever polenta, I think polenta is made with corn, like that's processed, but it's still single item things. It's not, where the nutrition label has got 50 items on it for one thing. Like I look at the Hot Pocket, like that's one of the things that it blows my mind, how unhealthy a Hot Pocket is. And I used to eat a lot of them when I was younger, because that was really easy when I was single. Just grab a box of Hot Pockets and throw them in the microwave. But when you look at the nutrition label, if there's almost 100 items on the nutrition label, but if I were to go to somebody and say, hey, can you make me a Hot Pocket from scratch? They're going to use like 10 different things. They would have flour and salt and probably egg in the dough. They would have, if it was a ham and cheese Hot Pocket, they'd have the cheese and the ham. And that would be the extent of the ingredients to make a homemade Hot Pocket, maybe 10 items to make it at home. But these companies, they use 50, 60, 70, 100 different items to make a single Hot Pocket. And they do that because, one, they need it to preserve, they need it to last in the freezer for as long as possible. So somebody, so they can sit on the shelves for as long as possible. But they need it to microwave a certain way. So they have to put certain chemicals in the food so that it microwaves a certain way. They don't want it to, maybe fall apart. So they might have to put binding agents in the dough that they wouldn't normally put in there. They have to put a nutrition label on the side of it. So they have to be worried about the calorie count that's on the food. So if they can use an artificial flavoring for cheese, it might be more beneficial to use that, because then they don't have the added calories that they would have from the natural cheese that they could use. Or, there's other products that they can add to it for the flavoring that don't add calories, because they want to make sure that that nutrition label hits that marker they're trying to hit. They use maybe a lot more sodium so that there's not as many calories. And then they keep that calorie number low, and then they make it a big, bold number at the top. And then they try to hide the sodium number as tiny as they can on the bottom of the label. And it's all games that they're playing to get us to buy their products. And When it's for things like, entertainment, going to a movie or seeing a sports team, them using those psychological tricks is more acceptable. And it's, maybe why some of these things were developed. One of the stories I like to tell was when I was in elementary school, we would go to the local university and they would give us a big spiel about how the guest visitors locker room was painted pink, not as pink as my shirt, but it was like a subtle pink. And they did that to help create a psychological environment in the visitors locker room that wasn't aggressive, because they had done studies on colors and found that pink was a calming, soothing color. So they thought, we'll paint the visitors locker room pink. It might cause them to be less aggressive when they play us at home. And that told to us when we were in 6th grade is like, oh my God, these people are geniuses that they thought of something like this. But those same people took that idea and that mentality and said, hey, if you use a certain shade of red and a certain shade of yellow, it induces hunger in people, even if they're not that hungry, or if they are a little bit hungry and they see that shade of red, they tie that instinctually to an apple and health food or something, red peppers, things like that. And so then they use these psychological tricks to get us to come and purchase their foods. And that's very predatory. And it's the world that evolved over the past, millennia. And it's the world we live in, and we live in a very predatory world that they want to get your dollars, and they know they can get your dollars by stimulating your dopamine. And by eliminating processed foods, you eliminate those unnatural dopamine stimuluses from your environment. The highest dopamine things that I have had in the past, well, I guess since I reset, would be like nut butters, like that's a much higher processed food than I normally eat, but it's not crazy process. It's just nuts. Like, it's not nuts with sugar and oils and all these other things that are added to the foods, and oils is the, as far as processing foods goes right now, I think oil is as processed a food as you can find. And many diets are saying to get rid of oil. And I think that is, a good thing for people to get rid of oil. I'm glad that I got rid of oil. So happy we don't have oil in our house. We don't have it on our stove. We don't have it anywhere in our kitchen. And everything just feels nicer without having oil around. So eliminate that at the very least. Get rid of that processed food, but start working on the other ones and try working towards total abstinence of processed foods. I know it's difficult in the world we live at, but if you can make your house clean, then that's the first place to start, and then go from there. But I'm going to get out of here, guys. I want to thank you so much for watching and supporting my channel and checking in today. If you guys have not eliminated the processed foods from your diet yet, eliminate the processed foods from your diet now. If you've not subscribed to the channel, get subscribed to the channel. Click on that bell icon so you get alerted when I go live or post new videos. If you've not hit the thumbs up on this video, hit the thumbs up on this video. And if you have not started your diet yet, get started right now. There's nothing coming up that's more important than your health and your overall well-being. There's nobody that reaches their goals and wishes that they would have waited. So get started now, guys. I will talk to you tomorrow.